before my dad passed away, him on this, because this machine helped clear a bunch of the area where our home now sits.
Okay.
And I've got pictures of him up on this thing running it.
Too cool.
Yeah, because he had run equipment when he worked in the woods back in the, I think he started working in the woods in about 1934.
Really? Who did he work for when he started out?
He worked for Crown Zellerback out on the west end of the Olympic Peninsula, out in the area of Nia Bay.
Wow. And what was he doing for them? Road building or?
He did pretty much everything. He did road building. He would do high climbing. When they were going to set up at their logging site where they'd have because everything that they were working with back in the 30s was all powered by steam.
Yeah.
And so that they would bring in their big donkey, and then they'd have, it would be set up essentially on the top of a hill, and then they'd have a spar line way up the top of a spar pole, and then they'd have going down all directions down the hillsides. They'd have cables.
Yeah.
So that as the trees were getting all by hand cut down, that they'd have choker setters that would then they take and hook onto these trees with chokers that had been brought down, and then with steam power they'd roll these things back up the hill.
Yeah. Wow.
And when he was working for Crown Zeller back in the 30s, and he was talking about how working conditions were not what you'd call real safe like they are now.
Yeah.
And he said that they usually had a man get killed every day.
Wow. One guy a day. Holy.
And he said, because it was the Depression.
Yeah, they needed work, so they went and did it. And
yeah, he says it was just about, this gruesome situation where they'd have guys just waiting around in the event that somebody got killed, that then they could snag that job.
Wow.
That my uncle was killed in the woods. They a tree that was being pulled up, and as you know, on a hillside, you really don't have much ability to steer the thing.
Yeah.
That as they were towing this, a log up the hill, he didn't get out of the way fast enough, and the log just rolled right over him.
Ooh.
And that they thought for certain he was dead instantly. They just took, like down here near where your machine's parked, they just tossed him in a ditch and just threw his jacket over him. And they were going to take him back into Port Angeles at the end of the workday. And somebody was checking on him. This is like late in the day. And they said, "Oh, Johnny's not dead."
Oh, gosh.
He just laid there after he got crushed all day long.
Oh, man.
And that he did live for a couple of years after that. But, back then, they really couldn't do a whole lot for him. And because of the nature of his injuries, he turned into just this intense diabetic.
Okay.
And that it's the diabetes that killed him. And back in the 30s, they had no treatment for that.
Right. Yeah, sugar disease or whatever they called it.
They called it back then sugar diabetes.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah.
Isn't that something else? Yeah, people can't fathom what it would have been like to work in those conditions back then.
Most people have zero idea. I wound up being my dad's caregiver for a couple of years after we got moved out here. And I really, really feel fortunate. It was a lot of work, a lot of stress, but at the same time, I was able to spend a lot of hours with him,
Yeah.
and he would talk about all these old things, back in the 20s and 30s and 40s. My dad was
Wow.
born in 1919. He would have been 100 in February of this year.
Wow.
That he passed away the 2nd of January of 2017. He was
Okay.
just 5 weeks short of his 98th birthday.
Wow. Man, that is something else.
Yeah.
Did he tell you how old he was when he started working in the woods?
Well, yeah, that actually got him in trouble
Oh.
because he went to work for this one company, and I don't know the name of it. I think he had worked for Blodell
Mm-hmm.
Donovan, but he also worked for Crown Zellerback, and he said that one particular day, the woman who was the cook at this for this logging operation, she knew that it was his birthday. It was his 16th birthday.
Oh, okay.
And the big boss, he comes walking in and he's looking at the birthday cake and goes, "Oh wow, somebody's having a birthday." And he's noticed, he goes, "Okay, who's 16?" And my dad says, "Well, yeah, that's me." "Well, you can't work here." Now he'd already been there almost a year.
Oh, wow.
And so he got fired that day.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he got fired on his 16th birthday. And he went doing some other work. He had worked at dairies in the Dungeon Esquim area.
Yeah.
And then his mom had to sign the paperwork so that when he turned 17, he joined into the Civilian Conservation Corps.
Okay.
And he was in the CCCs for a couple of years. And then, when he's now 19, now he doesn't need anybody's permission.
Okay.
And so he was able to go back to work at Crown Zellerback.
Wow.
That he worked 6 days, no, he didn't. He worked 7 days a week. That
Wow.
he said that his hours were dark to dark. And
Gosh.
that on the weekend, he would do the maintenance on all their equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would use their big equipment. He would then cut roads, but then during the weekdays, then he worked as a member of the logging crew.
Wow. He tell you what his scariest experience was in the woods?
Yeah, he talked about that. He said it was the very, very first time he ever climbed a spar pole to go up and knock all the equipment loose, and it just, obviously at the velocity of gravity, all this stuff starts traveling down, so you got to be out of the way. He was up on this pole. He said it was the very, very first time he ever had climbing hooks on.
Oh.
And he was 220 feet up in the air.
Oh, man. That's a little ways.
Especially for your first time.
Oh, gosh. And how old was he when he first did that?
He was 15.
Okay, when he was climbing. Wow, 15 years old. You imagine having a 15-year-old these days go up and do something like that? There's no way it happened, I don't think.
I think the boss and all the rest of the company hierarchy would all be in handcuffs.
Wow. That's pretty cool. When did he quit logging? Did he say what year that was?
Yep. He quit logging in 1945.
Wow.
It was right at the end of World War II that he had tried to enlist into the Army,
Mm-hmm.
but because he was working in the woods, now he was old enough. He was old enough to go into the Army. No paperwork had to be authorized by a parent or anything. But because he worked in the woods, and the material that they were cutting and harvesting was being used for the manufacture of plywood.
It was wartime stuff, so.
And that logging and the manufacture of plywood was considered a critical project for the war effort.
Okay.
And so he went, and his service classification was 4AF. And what the F meant was you're disqualified because of the work that you do as a civilian.
Wow.
And so he worked all through World War II in the woods. And then right after the war was over, and that was coming into summertime, and the woods were shut down, and that my uncle was the superintendent of the brand new PUD that had just 6 months before got started up in Clallam County.
Yeah.
And that my uncle says to my dad, he says, "What are you doing at home? I need you." And my dad says, "I don't know anything about the power line business." He says, "I need you right now to be in charge of my brushing crew." Sounds familiar out there dealing with the brush.
Yeah.
And
wow.
that so he was in charge of the brushing crew for about a year, and then he decided, I'd like to go through the apprentice program, and he became a journeyman lineman. And then for about the last 7 years or so that he worked for the PUD, he was their foreman of a crew, and then the last year he was the general foreman for all of the PUD in Clallam County.
Wow.
And then he retired. He wound up retiring 7 days before his 55th birthday.
Isn't that something else?
Yeah. And he was there, and he's not certain how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of power line that they put up.
Yeah.
Bringing electricity to a lot of homes.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. And did your dad, he ever say when he spent time in the woods, Mark, what his most favorite job was at all that?
Honestly, I think he loved the whole thing. My dad had been a hard worker all of his life, and that there really wasn't much in the way of a job that he wouldn't jump right into and take on. My dad just simply loved to work, and that he would just launch right in whatever it was, and he'd just do it. That would be a work ethic that a lot of folks could really tolerate having a little bit of today.
Yeah, I'd say so. Gosh, well, I appreciate you diving in depth on your dad's work history back in the 30s and 40s, working for the Crown Z and whatnot out in the woods.
Sure, glad to.
All right, you enjoy your day.
I will. Thanks.